The emotional mastery process. How do we transform from a kid who just reacts to events and emotions into a king who uses the obstacles to reach new levels of significance and fulfillment? The emotional mastery process uses 5 simple questions, the 5 EMP questions, to put your king back in the driver's seat. The catalyst to use these 5 questions is any time your experience of life is not what you want it to be. The following is an overview of the questions. We will dive into each one individually in the following chapters. It starts with learning to be a non-judgmental observer. EMP question 1. What did I observe? What really happened? What we think happened often didn't. As you learn more about the implications of this simple question, you'll realize just how much of your past conditioning is coloring your present experience. This question will be eye-opening. As you master this question, you will learn to describe the facts of your life without judgment that often distort our view of reality. To come upon truth, the mind must be completely free, without a spot of distortion. Jiddu Krishnamurti, Freedom from the Unknown. EMP question 2. What did I conclude? Rarely is any event of any kind just an experience. We are wired to understand what we are experiencing by our conditioned past experience, and we are wired to jump to conclusions. In this step of the process, you'll begin to untangle your observations with your interpretations, and you'll see how the conditioning of your past experience is impacting how you're experiencing the actual event. EMP question 3. Based on my conclusion, what was my emotional state? Your feelings flow directly from the conclusions you reach about the events that you observe. And you will discover repeating patterns of trigger, meaning, feelings during this step of the process. While these interpretations we give to events create our feelings, it's the feelings that drive our actions and behaviors. Simply put, developing mastery over your emotions will change where you end up in life. EMP question 4. What action did I take from that emotional state? Broadly, there are 3 kinds of actions the kid takes in response to feelings: fight, flight, or freeze. But these reactions break into common behavior patterns that sell a lot of self-help books: procrastination, overworking, anger, coping mechanisms like drugs, alcohol, porn, binge watching TV, the internet, extreme dieting, showing off, self-criticism. The 4th question gives you deep insight into how quickly you jump to conclusions and ultimately react. EMP question 5. Did that action move me closer to or farther away from my intended outcome? Now you arrive at the king's question. The king is outcome driven. The king takes actions towards objectives that are important and meaningful to him. The king learns to discern between kid-driven reactive, conditioned outcomes and outcomes he wants to pursue because they are meaningful to him. These 5 EMP questions are your lidar to seeing the root cause of your life experience. They will provide you with life-changing distinctions and help you make better decisions from which your life flows. Now, obviously, the time to run yourself through these questions is after an event has triggered you, not in the heat of the moment. The emotional mastery process is an after-action tool. Away from the heat of the moment, you take the time to work through the invisible perception, meaning, feeling, action, outcome change. You begin to understand why you felt the way you did, decided on the actions you did, and received the outcomes you did. If you get nothing else from this book other than practicing these 5 questions whenever you're triggered, then you will dramatically transform your life. slow motion magic. Again, slow motion magic. When I taught skiing, the hardest students to work with were the intermediate skiers. That's because by the time they had reached that intermediate level, many of the bad habits actually felt right to them. And ironically, the corrections I gave them felt wrong. It wasn't uncommon for them to hear a correction, go back to doing it habitually wrong, and then thinking they had made the correction. The magic solution to this problem was video recording. I would record them and play it back to them. Now they could see for themselves the mistakes that they were making. But even that wasn't good enough to bring about the change. I had to go a step further and put the video in slow motion so that they could see the smaller distinctions that they could take action on. For example, take a ski turn. At full speed, a turn looks like a single skill element. But there are actually 3 parts to it. There's the initiation, the fall line, and the finish. Then each of those elements has smaller distinctions. That's the level where a skier can make changes and transform their turns. The same is true with our triggers. There are 5 elements of a trigger, but without slowing them down with the EMP questions, you'll never see them, or their more subtle distinctions. It will just seem like every angry reaction. It will just seem like a single angry reaction or a moment of hurt. And that really doesn't give you anything meaningful to change. Typically, the strong athletic skiers had the hardest time. They had the strength to muscle through turns and wrestle themselves down the hill. So what if they had to work 10 times harder than the more efficient skier? It was working for them, so why change? They were in for a rude awakening in their 40s and 50s, as I found out. Years of working against the forces of nature like gravity and momentum left them with knee and ankle injuries. Age slowly took away their strength. Their strategy wasn't sustainable. This is very much like many high achievers. They have the emotional strength to battle the kid into submission, so why do anything differently? Like skiers who muscle through their strategies, their strategy isn't sustainable either. It's so much easier and elegant to work with the forces of nature. You can ski all day and not become exhausted. You have more of an enjoyable experience. And frankly, you're more pleasing to be around and watch as you navigate the slopes with grace and elegance. The same is true for your life. When you use the 5 EMP questions like a slow motion video replay to review your emotional triggers, it's a total game changer. You begin to realize that with each question, there is a world of possibility and options you've never realized before. You now understand the chain of reactions that led to an undesirable action. And you perceive a myriad of possibilities, perceptions, meanings, feelings, responses, and outcomes available to you at each link of the chain. It's like following a tree trunk up its ever-expanding branches, leading to a different potential reality. Of course, you still have emotional reactions to people and events that surprise and disappoint you. Yes, you're human. None of us get to avoid being human. Your heart pumps blood, your lungs bring oxygen, and your mind creates chains of perception, reaction, outcomes. But we can understand why we often react in ways we don't want to. We can decrease the intensity and the duration of our trigger reaction chains when we do. And when we can learn to anticipate and neutralize them before they start, the emotional mastery, we can decrease the intensity and the duration of our trigger reaction chains when we do. And we can learn to anticipate and neutralize them before they start. The emotional mastery process is the roadmap to accomplishing that. With practice, you'll be able to, 1, reduce the intensity with which you experience negative emotions. 2, reduce the time you feel these negative emotions. 3, learn to see reactions coming and just let them pass like a wave. 4, improve your working and personal relationships. 5, improve your leadership skills. 6, create a much better life. 7. See possibilities and potential for your life and future that you can't imagine right now. 8. End much of the adversarial relationship between the kid and the king and come to a more loving and compassionate view of yourself and others. In the next chapter, you'll see how pervasive our conditioned perception, meaning, feeling, action, outcome change can be even in everyday encounters. And you'll have the opportunity to experience the 5 EMP questions in action. Later, we'll take a deep dive into each link in the chain.